Welcome to the AI Brief from the YPO Technology Network. I'm Stephen Forte. Something that happened back in March came due on Thursday. 153 gigabytes of stolen credentials went public. The fastest way to tell you what is in that archive is to tell you whose keys are inside it. By the end of this episode, you will understand how software that nobody in your company bought from a supplier, nobody vetted, ended up holding the keys to your cloud, and why the second half of this story is the half that does not go away. Last week, we looked at AI labs failing their own containment tests. That was about the people building the models. Today is about your own build pipeline. Start with what surfaced on Thursday, 153 gigabytes, 433,000 files. Hudson Rock is an Israeli firm that tracks stolen credentials for a living. It traced 118,000 of those dumps back to 2,488 corporate domains. A second threat intelligence firm independently put the number near 2,500 organizations. The archive holds Amazon Web Services secret keys. It holds Salesforce client secrets. It holds Slack signing secrets and Microsoft Azure settings. And it holds keys to AI providers. Volkswagen appears in the reconstructed exposure. So does John Deere, so does FedEx, so do Siemens and Samsung and Cisco, so does Deloitte. Read that back. An automaker's in there, so is a tractor manufacturer, so is a courier, so is a firm that companies pay to tell them how to avoid exactly this. It is worth being precise about what those credentials are, because stolen keys sounds like a password problem, and it is not. A cloud secret key is what a machine uses to act as the company. It can start servers, read storage, and move data. A signing secret is what lets software prove a message genuinely came from you. These do not let a stranger read your email. They let something impersonate your systems. Now, the caveat and putting it up front makes this stronger rather than weaker. These are figures for exposure, reconstructed from the archive. They are not confirmed breaches, company by company, Hudson Rock said so explicitly. Here is the part that should genuinely bother you, though. A great many of the credentials in that archive carry no identifying information at all, which means a company can be sitting in that data set with no practical way to find out. So how did the keys get out? LiteLLM is a free open source gateway. Think of it as the switchboard that sits between a company's own applications and the AI models they call. Nobody purchases it. An engineer installs it in an afternoon. But the way in was not LiteLLM. On the 19th of March, an attacker group published a compromised version of Trivy. And Trivy is a security scanner, the tool you run to check whether the rest of your software is safe. LiteLLM's own automated build system then installed that poison scanner by itself, because that is what automated build systems do. 5 days later, on the 24th of March, 2 malicious versions of LiteLLM appeared on the public registry where the world's Python software is published. They were live for roughly 40 minutes. 40 minutes was enough. In that window, the poisoned versions were pulled automatically into thousands of companies' build systems, which is exactly where credentials live, because that is the machinery that holds the keys in order to deploy anything at all. The burglar came in through the burglar alarm, and there is a reason a gateway is close to the worst thing on the list, to poison. It sits in the path of every AI call the company makes, which means it is trusted with every AI provider key the company holds. One component, all of the keys. That is efficient architecture, and it is a concentrated failure. Picture Vega Components, a 200-person auto parts maker outside Puebla. There was no purchase order for LiteLLM, no vendor onboarding, no security questionnaire, no contract, no account manager, nobody to call. One engineer, one install command on an ordinary Tuesday. That is not the story of a careless company. That is how most of the AI stack arrived in most companies this year. And anyone here with an engineering team already knows it. It is also how the exposure travels. Vega sells to automakers, and automakers push security obligations down their supply chain by contract. So a free install nobody logged becomes some months later a question from a customer's procurement team that somebody at Vega has to answer in writing. You might reasonably conclude the answer is to stop using free open source components. That is not available to you. Your commercial vendors are built out of the same parts, and so is the software running this podcast. Which brings me to the second half, and the half that survives the patch. LiteLLM did patch, for the record. New version, rebuilt release pipeline, isolated build environments, stronger gates. In May, Anthropic's, the AI lab behind Claude, published the first results from something it calls Project Glasswing. It pointed its models at more than 1,000 open source projects and told them to hunt for security flaws. The data is from the 22nd of May, so it is about 3 months old. The point it makes is structural, and structural points do not go stale. The models found 23,019 vulnerabilities. 6,202 of those were rated high or critical. Where the findings were handed to security firms to check independently, 90% were real. That 90% matters more than it sounds. Every technology leader listening has at some point been handed a scanner report with thousands of findings and quietly learned to ignore it because most of it was noise. This is not that. 9 in 10 were genuine. Now, the other column, 530 of those high-severity flaws were formally disclosed to maintainers, and maintainers for most open-source software means volunteers. Of those 530, 75 have been patched, 65 carry a public advisory, average time to fix one about 2 weeks, 23,000 found, 75 fixed. Anthropic's own framing is the cleanest version of it. Progress on software security used to be limited by how quickly we could find new vulnerabilities. Now it is limited by how quickly we can verify, disclose, and patch them. And then they published a sentence they were under no obligation to publish. Several maintainers, they said, are severely capacity constrained. Some have asked Anthropic to slow down the rate of disclosure because they need more time to design the patches. Think about what it takes to put that in your own announcement. The headline was 23,000 vulnerabilities found by artificial intelligence. Nothing required them to add that the volunteers on the receiving end are asking them to stop. Here is my read. These two stories are one story. Finding software flaws has been industrialized. Fixing them has not. Discovery now scales with how much compute you point at the problem. Repair still scales with how many unpaid volunteers have a free weekend. It is a fire marshal who can now inspect every building in the city before lunch, filing his reports to a repair crew of 3, and that gap widens every quarter in the attacker's favor because the same capability is available to both sides. And only one side has to wait for a maintainer to find the time. That is the whole asymmetry. Machine speed discovery, volunteer speed repair. Nothing in either story requires anyone to have done anything wrong. The AI wave is not sitting on top of this problem. It is built out of it. The gateway, the scanner, the framework, the libraries underneath all three. The modern AI stack is assembled largely from software that nobody bought, which means software that nobody contractually stands behind. 2,488 companies learned that from a data dump they did not know they were in. Several of them sell security for a living. Software you did not buy is still software you run. That is the YPO Tech Network AI brief for Monday, August 17th. I am Stephen Forte. If this was useful, send it to a fellow member. I will be back tomorrow with more. Until then, stay sharp.